Do you know how it's most teenagers' dream to be left home alone by their parents for an extended period of time? Well, after what happened to me the first weekend that I had been left home alone, that was something I personally dreaded. You see, I had just started my sophomore year of high school, and I had always been a responsible kid. So when my parents' anniversary came around, they asked me if they could trust me to be alone by myself for 2 nights while they went on a small trip. I loved the idea, and at the time, I couldn't get them out of the house fast enough. The following week dragged on, but soon enough it was Friday, and I knew by the time I got home from school, my parents would have been gone, and I would have the house to myself. The first thing I did when I got home was turned on the TV and grabbed my laptop to start contacting my friends. I didn't want to throw a party that weekend, but I definitely planned on having a few friends over to watch some movies and enjoy the empty house. I logged into Facebook and saw that no one was online, so I figured I would check back in an hour or so. I figured to pass the time, I would watch some South Park and scroll through Reddit. As I was sitting on the couch, the hours began to pass, and I hadn't heard from any of my friends. I figured they were just busy though, and I would hear from them later. I began to make dinner for myself. I was just going to make some pasta and sauce, but before I could even turn the burner for the stove on, I heard a knock at my door. I paused for a moment and was curious as to who might be knocking when I heard it again. Only this time the knocking was a lot louder, and I figured it was just one of my friends that probably decided to just stop by unannounced. I yelled out for whoever was knocking to hang on and told them that I would get to the door in a second. I made my way out of the kitchen and down the small hallway that led to the front door. The person on the other side was still pounding on it. I yelled louder for them to stop and told them that I was coming to answer the door. Before opening it, I decided to look through the peephole just to make sure it was actually one of my friends on the other side. But when I got a good look, I tossed myself away from the door. Standing on my front porch was a full-grown man who appeared to be covering his face with a ski mask or hat of sorts. Before I could react any further, I heard a smashing sound from the other side of my house. Someone had broken through the sliding door in the kitchen. I tried to run through the hallway and get into my room so I could hide away, but before I could make it 10 feet, the person who had broken through the kitchen door already had their hands on me. I was thrown into the wall and then onto the ground. The intruder bound my arms behind my back and tied them together with rope they had brought with them. And after opening the front door for his accomplice, the two walked over to my basement stairs and tossed me down. I hardly felt it, as my head bounced off multiple stairs on my way down. As I was laying on the cold concrete floor, I could hear the sound of men rummaging through my house above me. They were only inside for what seemed like 15 or 20 minutes before I heard them both running out of the front door. I tried my best to get up, but anytime I got close, I would get dizzy and drop back to the floor. I ended up being trapped on my basement floor for the entire night before I was finally found. My parents called the police after I didn't contact them the night before or that morning and asked them to stop by and check on me. After my parents found out what happened, they rushed back from their trip and met me at the hospital. I was fine aside from a mild concussion, but the thieves ended up getting away with more than $6,000 worth of jewelry and electronics from my parents' room. As far as we know, the intruders were never found. The summer after I graduated from high school, my parents had planned a trip for them to visit my aunt. During that time, they had agreed to let me stay home and have a small party with just a few of my friends to celebrate a successful school year. The party went off without a hitch. There was no funny business, and when it was time to clear out and go home, everyone listened to me when I told them to leave. All in all, I thought the night was a success. That was until I went up to my room for some sleep. I was pretty tired, so after cleaning up a bit, I decided to leave the rest for the morning, and I would handle it all after waking up. I made sure to lock all the doors, and I went upstairs to go to sleep. I knew I was tired because I was asleep within 2 minutes after my head touched the pillow. It was like turning off a light. Sadly, as quickly as I fell asleep, I was woken up. My eyes shot open as I heard the sound of something slamming downstairs. I knew something had fallen, but I couldn't think of what it could have been. I mean, I was home alone, so I didn't know what could have fallen on its own. And that was when I realized it. Someone else must have been in the house with me. I did my best to stay silent and listen as closely as I could. And sure enough, I could hear the sound of one or more people walking around downstairs. I assumed it was just some kids from the party who hadn't heard me tell everyone to go home, so I figured I would just call out to them. I got out of bed and walked over to my door. I cracked it open and yelled, "Hey, the party's over. Everyone went home." Suddenly, there was silence. I could tell that something wasn't right. Out of nowhere, I could hear the slamming of footsteps as whoever it was began running through my house and towards the staircase. I didn't even think. I closed my door and ran straight for the window above my bed. I had used the window to sneak out of my house before, so I knew how to get in and out of it quickly. I slid right through it and onto the roof of my house. As I turned back, I could see my door handle moving as if someone was struggling to open it. I turned and began to make my way down the side of my house and ran across my yard into my neighbors. After pounding on the door for a minute, they came running out. I informed them about the intruders in my house, and they told me to come inside and they would call the cops. While we waited for them to arrive, we were shocked to see 3 different people fleeing from my house. None of them appeared to be carrying any stolen property, which either means they didn't find anything worth taking, or that they were there for a more violent reason. Since the incident, my parents have installed security cameras along with an alarm system. Luckily, we have never had a similar situation occur. Growing up, I had to get used to my dad pranking me, which is why when he called me to tell me not to answer the front door as I was watching TV, I thought he was just messing with me. My phone rang, and that was the first thing he said, "Don't answer the door." I froze for a moment, but then began to laugh because I assumed he was just trying to freak me out. But when the doorbell rang, things got increasingly more serious. My dad must have heard the bell on the other side because he very firmly said, "Don't go to the door." I asked him what was going on because I could tell how serious he was being, and he told me that he wasn't sure, but the police were on their way. At that point, I was both shaking with fear, but very curious as to what was going on. The doorbell rang again, and I figured I could peek out the window and see who was there. I leaned over my couch and slowly moved the curtain out of the way, and my dad must have heard me gasp because all he said was, "Hey, you're gonna be okay. The police will be there soon. Just don't answer the door." And I wish that made me feel better. But outside my house, there were at least 3 men, all dressed up in clown clothing and carrying what looked like weapons. I could see 2 of them standing on my porch, while another was walking around my yard. I told my dad that I was scared, and that was when the ringing of the doorbell turned to slamming on the door. I couldn't tell if they were knocking really hard or trying to kick it down. I began to panic, and as I turned away from the window that was facing the front of my house, I screamed. Standing on the other side of my house, with his face pressed against the window, was the 3rd clown. He waved his hand slowly as we made eye contact. The slamming at the front door grew louder and louder, and my dad tried to calm me down, though he knew there was little to be done until the police arrived. Thankfully, I could hear the sound of sirens in the distance. Sadly, so did the men trying to break in. The 3 of them quickly ran off my property and down the road away from the sirens. Once the police arrived, I unlocked the door and let them in. We explained everything to them, and they let us know that we weren't the only call that they had gotten like this in the past few months. Apparently, these 3 had been terrorizing people in the surrounding area for a few months before I had a run-in with them.